All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Screenwriting for Games, the challenge of choice-based narratives, part of SCAD GamingFest. I hope everyone has had a great first day of the festival so far. My name is Lauren O'Connor, and I am a librarian for the Writers Guild Foundation. The Writers Guild Foundation is based in Los Angeles. We support writers and protect and promote the history and craft of writing for film, television, and gaming. You should know our library is open to the public, not just WGA members. And at some point, we're going to open back up in person again, too. So I encourage everyone on this session to visit wgfoundation.org to learn a bit more and check out our resources. You've probably already heard this today, and I'm sure you'll hear it again as the festival continues. But no matter the medium you're writing for, it's all about story. In this session, we have three exceptional storytellers to share their insight and expertise. And I am thrilled to introduce the three dynamic writers who are joining us today. We have Sandy Chen, the 2020 Women in Games Global Hall of Fame Award winner, whose credits include The Witcher and Terminus. The award winner and multiple WGA award nominee for her work on the God of War franchise, Marianne Krawczyk. And Patrick M. Verone, writer, producer on the popular Netflix series Disenchantment, whose additional credits, both for television and gaming, include the Simpsons and Futurama franchises. Thank you so much, panelists, for taking the time to be here with us. I'm giving you a huge virtual round of applause for everybody here. Yeah, so let's just jump right in. First, to give everybody a little context, I'd like to hear from each of you how you came to write for video games. Anyone can start.
Ladies first, please.
Okay, I'll go.
Really?
So I graduated from.
Go ahead.
I graduated from USC in screenwriting, and so I very purposefully looked for a job in the video game industry, and really wanted to pursue my talents there. And I was looking into what I thought would be the most exciting field and part of writing, which I thought would be interactive. So I don't have this. My breaking in story is resumes, sending them out and cold letters.
Got it. Oop. We can't hear you, Marianne. Wait. Hold on. Let's see. Well, Patrick, while we're trying to get her audio back, you want to share your breaking in story?
Or I can just lips. If she moves her lips, I can say.
We can put words in her mouth.
Well, I come to video game writing as a third or fourth career. I'm mostly a television writer, having worked for the last, I don't know, too many years in animation, mostly. Things like the credits you mentioned, The Simpsons, Futurama, now Disenchantment. And in each of those realms, there was always at some point crossover into the gaming world. And so whenever an outside vendor, as we call them, would come to Matt Groening and 20th Century Fox and the production people at either Futurama or The Simpsons, they would have the basic idea for a game, and they would have, in fact, a lot of dialogue and a lot of writing done. And unfortunately, they needed somebody who'd worked on the shows, and to bring the flavor, as it were, of the actual original content. And so what I do typically is it's derivative. And I mean that in two ways. It actually refers to both the content of the original show and then all the ideas that I've rehashed for years and years. That's how I've been in the field.
Cool. Do we have audio, Marianne?
Can you hear me?
Woo-hoo! Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Okay, so I had been writing a little bit in entertainment and television, some features prior to video games. I had a friend that was working at Sony Santa Monica, and I just was like, I hear that sometimes they need writers. She's like, no, we have a writer. It's like, okay. 2 months later, I get a call. Oh, we don't have a writer. So I went in and I talked to David Jaffe, who is the director of God of War 1. That was sort of my first experience, which turned out to be a good one. And from there, I ended up working with a company called Blindlight, and then I started working just freelance on various projects. And then I stayed with the God of War franchise as well, which also turned out to be good. So it was asking for work. It was definitely soliciting, but it was also kind of stumbled into a good project. So
got it.
Yeah.
So I want to know, we've kind of talked about how someone gets hired as a writer for video games, but where does a writer often come in the overall game creation process? Does that question make sense? Does it, like what, I guess what I'm asking is like, what comes first, the idea and the world of the game, and then they bring you on as the writer to kind of build that out? Or are you actively involved in creating the world and the idea?
Well, I've been brought on after alpha to write a script, which is pretty late in the process. It worked out. It was Skylanders. It worked out. But they had a pretty good idea that they wanted a story, and they had it sort of paced out for it. In God of War, the first one I was brought on after they had sort of established some of the design and what the world was. And so I was mostly answering a lot of questions, like, why does this happen? Why does he have white skin? Whatever the questions were, and sort of sewing it together.
Got it.
Then it was less likely that they would bring you on early. And now I think you start more often. It's been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the situation. If you're a full-time employee of the game company, it's possible you're there, while it's terminating. Mm-hmm. Or if you're embedded in the team, as I was at one point with THQ, I was actually driving to the office every day, even as a freelancer. So I was in the design meetings. The writing affected the design affected the writing. But other times, you can be brought in last minute. They didn't like the previous story writer. They needed something new. You're working with assets that are already made. And so you have to, decide we can't change these characters, but we're trying to change the story in some way. And also it can't be post-apocalyptic, and it has to be realistic too.
Yeah, and as I said, in my case, since I'm working on properties that are already sort of pre-sold, I've been brought in, and the other writers on the Simpsons tapped out, and on the various Futurama games, really, sometimes there's a full-fledged script there, and all we do is a rewrite. I without giving away top secret information, I do know that there's another project that in which I'm not involved, where they're building the game with the writer's input from scratch, and I don't know what that. I think that the world that they're building is already something that they substantially have in mind, but the writers are part of the gameplay and the interactivity of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I guess we'll wait for Sandy to come back. But I'll just jump into the next question. I was fortunate in preparing for this talk that I was able to look at some of the scripts you've written, because we have them in the library. And for students of game writing, my question, on their behalf would be, how did you learn to format a video game script? What does it look like on the page? And how might that differ from a screenplay or a TV script?
Well, I can do a show and tell if you want, which I suspect you do. If I share my screen here, will this give us an infinite regression of our screens, I assume? And then I will take you. Are you seeing this actual what I know as a script? This is what I think. Right. This is an episode of Futurama that is what those of us who write television and film for a living understand what a script looks like. There are, the names of these characters are completely imperceptible in that it's Inda and Lur, but here's one, Fry. It's a line of dialogue and then stage directions, etc. That's what a screenplay script looks like. So then here's what we were dealing with when we were writing the first Futurama game that I worked on, which was Futurama, a game of drones. This was it's a spreadsheet. It's in Excel, and you can see that along the top are the various categories. The position was level 251, which of course means nothing to me now. The panel was modal set. Again, I don't remember what that meant. This is a character name, so I understand that. It was the character of Qbert. They had artwork, so that's what the character's still frame image would have conveyed, that expression. And then here's the line of dialogue. So this goes on for, I forget what the color coding meant, but it probably meant we had to rewrite the stuff in gray, and then we did rewrite it when it was in peach. And then the Futurama Worlds of Tomorrow script looked like this. And again, in this column, I think this was effectively the stage direction, or what the gameplay was. And then this next column was the category of what we were writing, the character name, the character's expression, and then the line of dialogue. And often, then there were additional notes on the side. And often I do recall that because I did this for a year, when we would get these scripts sent to us, or it was actually a website that we would access, when we would get it, this would all the stage directions would be, I think, in white, and there would be a original dialogue there that we then had to rewrite. And then once we had rewritten it, because it was a shared document, we would color it, the background, green, so that the Futurama writers had a handle on it. And then finally, this is the way they do it with Tapped Out, where we are sent a Word document, and the category on the left, what I'm highlighting now, is what's been written by the in-house writer. And then this column, what they call the Gracie revisions, is blank when we get it. And then we do, the Simpsons rewrite. Gracie is, of course, Gracie Films, the reference to the Simpsons production entity. I believe, have I stopped sharing?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I'm still seeing my screen. I don't know what you're seeing, but
I still see the screen.
You're still seeing my screen?
There we go.
Now we're back to normal.
Anyway, so the short version of all that is, I don't know. It's whatever they send us. That's what but it definitely doesn't look like a script.
Right. Marianne, I saw some nodding going on there while he was talking.
It's possible to get very friendly with Excel, which is not fun to write in. I'm sure it's great software for other things. I do tend to write in Final Draft. Some companies have sort of their own proprietary screenwriting program that will then sort of shoot it into an Excel type thing for other uses. It depends. It's all over the place. There's no standard. I wish there were a standard, but it's not. Technologies are so different everywhere. But I think most often I use Final Draft because it seems to be the easiest for me to deal with, and then Excel. I haven't seen the one with the side-by-side stuff, which was actually...
Well, that, and again, that may be a hybrid that Tapped Out uses because it's writer driven, and they know that they're just writing a first draft that's not going to be used, and they're just trying to make it as close to what the show writers are used to. But everything else and the few things I've worked on that were not derivative, it's spreadsheets all the way down.
Yeah.
Which I don't like either.
Nobody does.
I can do accounting like that. I can do, I can add up the columns. I know how to, but it's
great, but it's not the most creative document to work in. So
So those of you out there watching who are the future of the industry, change it, make it happen, because we're not.
No one wants to write in Excel. So I was talking last night to some people in our virtual library, being like, "What do you want to know about video game writing? What should I ask since I'm moderating this video games panel?" And one of my coworkers actually wanted to know, is there like a standard, as there is with like feature scripts and TV scripts, is there kind of like a standard page count for a video game script, or is it just however long it is?
No, there's no standard. I've found the more linear, almost cinematic pieces like God of War. I always quote page count and then I'm completely wrong, and the producers are like, no. But in my estimation, they're like 120 to 150. I know The Witcher, if Sandy comes back, I'm sure she could speak to it. But I saw The Witcher script because I was reading one year for the awards, and I think it was more like 300. So I don't think there's nothing standardized, because every experience is different and it's continually evolving. Whereas I think film and television have sort of found their spot in history. Games are still, and I'll probably always will be, something that's finding new ground. So
for sure.
Yeah, I would add just that in my experience of dealing with the Writers Guild Awards, where for a long time the Writers Guild asked for the scripts in script form, and so you would have to, and that's I guess what's in the library, right? They're actual, and that's probably why we asked for it, so you can bind them and put them in. Wow, we have multiple Sandys.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wow, this is impressive. I can't possibly compete with this. But now we're down to 2. Anyway, my point was just that, we used to ask specifically for the game writing in a script form. And so the year that I submitted the Futurama Futurama Worlds of Tomorrow, which we wrote on a literal weekly basis on those spreadsheets. And so I took it upon myself to transfer, just cut and paste from Excel into a Word document, so that it looked like a script. It ended up being 500 pages long, which was a testament to the fact that, it was the Chinese water torture of just drip, drip, drip. Every week we wrote, 10 pages without really thinking about it. And that turned into 500 pages after a year of writing. And that's why I think they also put in a limit of 300 pages for the length for the awards. But yeah, no, I mean, these experiential games. There's why would you put guidelines on these things? Why would you put guardrails? Come on, this is no limits.
Right. Sandy, now that we have you back, we were just talking about how a writer learns the formatting of a video game script, and we were lamenting about writing in Excel. Is that something that you do in your process?
Yes. Actually, we just write in whatever the video company prefers, whether it's Excel or Word or their own scripting tool or Artisy. So you do end up learning different software or even proprietary tools that they themselves are the only ones using.
Got it. Let's see. So this is kind of like a related question, but I'm wondering, again, for people who are sort of budding writers, what have you done, or what does a person do to sharpen their storytelling tools in this particular medium? How do you get good? Is that a really hard question?
That's a hard question.
Well, the premise is that we're good, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
I'll practice. It's an art. It's a craft. You do it a lot. And this is, I always tell young writers that this is, and old writers who are new to it, that this is not something that you do right the first time. It's all about making it better. It's all about honing, it's a craft, it's an art, it's a trade. And the more you do it, I think, the better you get at it. And that's actually one of the great things about writing, as opposed to, directing or acting. You can do it. You can do it. I'm doing it now while I'm multitasking here. It's not something that requires you to go out and make a piece of film, or go out and have a showcase or audition. You just do it.
Anything to add, Marianne?
No, reps are really important. I think developing an instinct to know what to fight for is really important. Don't die on every hill. Collaboration is a huge part of this stuff that gets you to get to do the reps you need to do. So it's a little different. It's harder. You can practice writing screenplays and TV scripts on your own. You can do it for games too, but your specs are going to probably still be film and TV, right? So just keep working on the storytelling aspect of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I only watched the trailer of Will Wright's Masterclass, but he said something in that trailer that intrigued me enough that when I find time, I'm going to go back to it, which is feature film. The emotional palette is empathy, right? We look at the people and we have this great empathy for what they're going through, whereas the emotional palette in games is agency, right? So it's not that you feel bad for someone. It's like you feel bad about doing something, or you feel good about doing something. And I think that's fairly key. I've never heard it explained that way. But that's a huge thing to think about. And once you can make that shift, you can get better at this particular craft. I think it's a hard thing to shift over for some writers that have been doing the other style for a while.
That actually pushes me further down to a question further down the page that I have. So when you're writing, like an interactive story, what comes first, plot or character? And then are there specific questions that a game writer has to ask themselves with regard to character development that might differ from the more traditional, film or TV character development, because you're writing something that someone is actually, like an avatar that someone's actually going to have to, is it different? Is there anything different to that process?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm muted. So.
I'm gonna let Sandy if she has anything. Since we missed you for a little while.
Oh, can you hear me? I think I'm muted. So
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. I think one thing is that we talk about is the Ludo, what they call Ludo narrative dissonance. You can't force the player to have an emotion. So if you want them to really feel bad that their whole family got slaughtered, then you don't know. I mean, you could kind of say it, but maybe there is no attachment that the player has to these other characters that they just met like 2 seconds ago. And, you know, in a film or a TV show, you might see that happen really early on, but you know, with a game player, they have an attachment through the interaction that happens throughout the game. So maybe those 2 seconds isn't enough to really have much of a impact on them. So I think I would watch out for that, because I know that I've played games and you know, the character was expressing some emotions that I certainly didn't have as a game player. Like, just be like, oh, he's okay. You know, I'll see him again. You know, oh, that's all right. This character died. You know? And also, you know, they've pointed out that sometimes a player wants to do certain things. Like, that has nothing to do with the character development, that maybe you wanted the character to be shy and timid, and yet what's fun in the game is for the character to be aggressive and bossy and, you know, do things that are totally different.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is actually what might be called the dirty little secret of the kind of interactive game writing that I do, which is that you don't have to actually follow the story. You don't have to. It broke my heart the first time I watched a playthrough of something I had written where on YouTube where the player, as soon as the dialogue came up and all the stuff, you know, that we had slaved over, tap 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 tap, just ran right through it. Didn't, clearly no time to actually read it, just so that they get back to the next quest, to get back to the next. And that's you know, that's, I don't think people watch movies or TV shows like that. They don't speed through the TV show to get to the commercials. So you would, but that's a consideration, that people aren't necessarily there. You would hope that they would be there because the story is keeping you there, or it's engaging you in a way. And I think there's obviously a lot of people for whom that is the case, but then there's also the ones who are just there to, you know, do the interactives and solve the puzzles and play the games.
Yeah, you really have no control over the player, and there's always going to be the players that want to play, that break the game. There's always going to be the players that want to experience the narrative, which are really the ones you're writing for. I worked on a Star Trek game, and the opening sequence was they had to get off the Enterprise and to get on a shuttle, because we weren't beaming at the time, and save the people on the planet. And so we had all these prompts like, you better get down there now. Hey, the people need you. And it's like, yeah, but I could look at the Enterprise right now. I can go explore. And I know those people are going to be fine until I get there. So it just playing with stakes and different. Yeah. So I think the dissonance thing is a problem there, but I don't think there's a solution. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't control everybody. And since I teach, I talk about the modern warfare 2 scene of walking through the airport where you're supposed to shoot civilians. And I quiz my students. I'm like, who felt bad? And like, a couple will feel bad. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's like, I didn't care. That was just what I was supposed to do in the game. So I did it. Wow. There was no connection. So you just, I think it's impossible to predict.
What does that teach us about human nature?
I asked to leave the class, and then
I was told to do it.
Yeah, right.
Oof. Well, so here's another unrelated question. Do you find that you have to have any specific technical knowledge of the game development process in order to write a video game?
Thankfully, no. unless there's, I haven't. I did have to be working on something a while ago that never happened that involved just being taught a lot about how they were planning to do just those interactivity trees and the coding that went into choose your own story kind of writing. But I don't think that's any more technical than learning to type, which I don't.
Right.
And then there's.
I think it's helpful. I mean, it's helpful if you do know more about the game development process. But you shouldn't feel like I need to learn Unity, I need to code, I need to do art and sound yourself by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But you definitely need to know what is possible in a game because you don't want to write something that's they can't program.
Mm-hmm.
I write stuff they can't program. I just it's helpful. I tend to go to the other side of it. I'm like, I'm going to write really big. I'm going to write what can't be done, and then if you have a good team, then they can figure out. They can scope it down, or they can tell you, we're not going to do that. The most, I think, for the medium that you are actually writing for, like I worked on the HoloLens project with Microsoft for a while, and sort of understanding how that AR stuff worked helped me understand how to tell that story. So I think playing games is going to do as much as knowing Unity, honestly, unless you really want to code. So
it's good advice.
Yeah, apropos of that, I do think that as we move into more AR and VR stuff, it's going to be immersive, and the storytellers are going to need to know what you can and can't do, just like people who wrote for silent movies had to learn a different set of skills to write for sound films, and it wasn't quite the same color versus black and white, but yeah, no, I think there are technological. It doesn't hurt, I would think, to
Right.
be able to understand what's possible, and I applaud Marianne for for the ambition of trying to make, because I've always found in animation, just in TV animation, that if you write something that you just assume they can do, and they'll grumble about it, but then they'll do it, and and they will expand their own imagination and facilities.
Yeah, and that's sort of my next question. I'm wondering what's the collaborative process like with the developers and like the project managers and stuff. How does that kind of flow?
That's not a question for me, because they just give me stuff and I do it.
Got it. Yep.
That's the collaboration.
I tend to write with narrative directors and creative directors, and usually some other people that either want to be writers or are on a team of writers. And then the project manager just gives me sort of the milestones and kind of keeps us all on track in the meetings. But that's, depending on if you're full time or how embedded they want you to be with the team and the type of game. I know a lot of people that sit with designers all day long and sort of work out level design and narrative together, which is smart. So,
yeah, I think it just differs from company to company. Some companies, they have everything written out and you're just trying to make it better. Other companies, they don't have anything. They have maybe 2 paragraphs. You have to come up with the entire story, the level, what's going on in levels. It really differs.
Got it. Let's see, what else? Okay, I like this question a lot. What do you think is sort of the secret sauce of a great video game franchise? Is there something that that all great video games have in common?
If we knew that, we
Right.
would do it.
That's right. If we had that recipe.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'd share it. No.
Yeah.
I think world building is really important. There's too many variations. There's like world building and first person, where you're really experiencing the story and the plot becomes more important because you're trying to get through it, versus something like writing Batman Arkham, where you're really wanting to play Batman and experience it through that character. So I don't know. It just, again, it's a very broad medium for storytelling. So it just sort of depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because most of what I do, most of these derivative games are the sort of free to play model. Success is defined by getting people to put money into it.
Right.
Opposed to getting, with movies. Movies are more like what I would assume the classic video game style of you pay your money, you get the content, and then you enjoy the content. Whereas with the free to play, the goal is to not only to get you in the door, which it's basically the heroin addiction model, where they get you in the door and then they try to keep you addicted to it, and that's but sorry, I don't mean to be glib about it, but I mean the whole idea is that you have a story that's being told that is designed to keep people involved. But there's also the other thing, which is the game mechanism, which is keeping people involved. And that's where I can't possibly comment on, what my one son constantly plays the 2K, basketball games, which to me, for a long time I thought, okay, there's no story there. They're playing basketball. And this was a few years ago, but he came back and he said his entire generation had this experience where there was a 2K game that had a cinematic opening that was, I think it was written and directed. It was probably co-written by Spike Lee. And it told this whole story about how you, the player, are involved with a colleague or a cohort who has I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was this tragic story that you ended up doing something that stabbed him in the back, and you got I'm getting this story all wrong, but you got drafted into the NBA and they didn't. And all I remember is that he went to school on, it was dropped on a Friday afternoon. They played it all weekend, and he went to school on Monday morning. And everybody in his class, all his young men who played the game, just all came together, and they had all shared this experience of how they had stabbed this colleague in the back, and all this terrible life experience that they'd all had, that they still have. And that was because they were trying to play this basketball game, and they had to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the power of storytelling, even within a
shared experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think many people will have different opinions of what makes a great game, and I think part of it is the sum of all parts. Does it mesh well together? Is it a great experience? And I remember sitting in a award ceremony for Witcher 3, and all the awards lead up to Game of the Year, and they go through the individual parts. Best art, best cinematics, best music, and sitting there waiting, is The Witcher 3 ever going to win something? And and they did win Game of the Year. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so I want to, we have some students that have questions to ask, so I want to make sure we get to that, and I don't take up too much more time. So I think we're ready to bring on Finn. Finn, if you have your question for the panel.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, everyone. It's awesome talk. What's going on? I'm a graduate student for dramatic writing, focused in TV writing. So I love hearing everything that you've been talking about. So I have a couple questions about that. But as a gamer, I'm definitely one of the story mode gamers that you referenced, Marianne. Or like I have definitely listened to or watched whole like story modes of like 6-hour video games just for the story, games that I've never played. So to go into my questions, from what I've read, it seems like most games are written by a team of writers, much in the way a TV series or a big budget animation from like Pixar or DreamWorks might be developed and written. So is TV writing with long form plotting and character arcs and such a good analogy for us to use in wrapping our head around game writing? And yes or no, how do you go about structuring the narrative of a video game?
Wait, yeah, that's not a yes or no question.
Of course.
Yes.
No, as in yes or no, the before question.
Oh, that was a yes or no question. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, because as I said, all any writing that develops your skills in terms of long arc storytelling, and this has actually changed in the last 5 years since the advent of streaming. The way we wrote Futurama and the way The Simpsons has been written for your entire lifetime, versus how we're now writing shows like Disenchantment, is that was 22 separate episodes that could be watched in any order, whereas now you have to, we sometimes think of it as a 5-hour long movie. The 10 half-hour episodes is just this, because people are going to binge it that way. And so that type of understanding the long-term arcs and the, as they are rolled out over the course of multiple sittings. I mean, there's a few people who will watch it all in one sitting, but mostly it's over the course of time. I think that I would assume that is helpful in that kind of in similar in that story structuring. And then what was your other question?
I mean, just in general, like the structuring. I guess you already answered that. I do have one more question, if I could ask it. Kind of specifically for Marianne, but I'd love everyone to, of course, if they have answers. Marianne, I was lucky enough to find the syllabus for one of the classes you taught at USC.
Uh-huh.
It was super interesting just to read. And in the syllabus for character development and storytelling for games, you mentioned prioritizing classic dramaturgy, which we're fortunate enough to study here. So I was wondering if you could speak to, where the overlap, where is there an overlap in functioning in this role of dramaturg for video games?
I'm not sure I can answer that. Are you sure it was my syllabus? I think.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
It was on UST at least. But if it's easier, I can reword it just to be like, how do you kind of transpose or translate the principles of dramaturgy into an interactive medium versus something we're just watching, like features or TV?
I'm going to rephrase it so I know I'm answering this. Just basic drama into I think how I approach things is in terms of tension, right? So dramatic tension, and it's different in games than it is because you don't have the same tools. You can't cut away. You have to stick with the same character. Dramatic irony is tough. It can be done. I think we just go back to sort of incorporating ideas around what the player experiences and seeing how they will, leaning into that more than sort of the audience and telling the story is not a satisfying answer, but that's what I got right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think theater background is useful in that, theater, you have experiences that can be more immersive and also more interactive. And definitely when we do prototyping, sometimes it is more like a theater experience rather than, you know, it depends on what kind of prototype you're doing, but definitely you can go up right to the person who would be an NPC and then try it out, a conversation or something. So you can definitely translate some of those skills.
Yeah, I have some students that are doing immersive, instead of developing a game, they're doing immersive stuff, and they are, some of them are musical theater. And it's interesting because the way they write feels like they're writing for actors, which is a really small nuance. It's like because I asked them, I was like, "Do you write differently?" And they're like, "Yeah, I feel like when I can allow the actor to ad lib or whatever, you can't get that in games, although there are systems." Shadow of Mordor did the whole thing where they just wrote a bunch of lines for a character and then just let them babble at each other, and 90% of the time it sounded like a conversation, and 10% of the time it was gibberish. But that's the closest we can get to sort of any kind of ad-libbing and making the experience fresh. It's hard because live theater is live and of the moment, and anything can happen, so that's tension all by itself, right? So we have to find other ways to find tension, either through boss battles, making it somewhat hard, somewhat above your level, or moments where two characters are talking to each other, or you're talking to an NPC. It's harder to get tension through those, but yeah.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Finn. So now we've got a question from Kira, I think.
Hi. I'm a freshman of the dramatic writing department here. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm huge fans of these games. I was wondering, what is the best way to approach agents about wanting to write for interactive media? And what has been the most challenging aspect for you all when transitioning from film or television to video games?
I don't know how to answer the agent question. I think mostly they're just looking for good writing that they understand. Giving someone a spreadsheet of your writing is not going to show them your skill set. So I think for like spec scripts, I'm working with Riot right now. We do a lot of prose work, so we like to see that kind of sample. We like to see if you've done any game. Sometimes we give a test. I don't know what agents look for. I think my experience is most agents look for experienced writers that they can get jobs. So breaking in is hard. Yeah.
So then when breaking in, do you have any tips for that? Or is that really just about finding someone to know?
I mean, that's the catch-22, is that you can't get a job unless you have an agent. You can't get an agent unless you have a job.
Right.
Obviously, though, that's not true, because at some point, somebody without a job got an agent, and somebody without an agent got a job. So if you ask 100 writers how they broke in, you'll get 100 different stories. And how they got their agent, substantially there's a parallel track of you're putting together a portfolio of writing itself and of jobs or experiences that you've had, which will both get you the next job and potentially an agent. But and I think as time goes by, more and more there are agents who know the field of jobs that are out there, where the studios or the game companies are looking for either new voices or voices that they already don't have in their stable, and so they'll go to the places that they typically go to, like agencies. And if those agencies don't have, they have to have clients. So it's my advice in general is put together as Marianne said, put together specs and a portfolio of whatever you think would get you work, and send that to agencies. And I'm old enough to remember a time when you actually had to print it out and go to the copy place and make multiple copies and put a stamp on it. Now it's all PDFs, and it's all even the meetings are virtual these days. So yeah, it's just I would suggest put the material together and send it out, and see who responds. And then as to your other question, what was the hardest thing? It really is getting used to, after all the years I was doing just formatted scripts, formatted the way I described, just getting used to putting it in a spreadsheet or putting it in some kind of a grid. I'm still not used to it.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I don't know that anybody. I think
I don't think an agent is necessary unless you want to do TV writing and film writing and other things.
I would go to the extent of saying that just look for entry-level writing jobs. They're out there these days, level 1, level 2. Knowing someone helps. Having a strong array of writing will help. And then I don't even think it's a question anymore, because I just think the generations coming up already see this. But when I was starting out, there were definitely people that had a harder time understanding the game design space. It was like how you move through space versus, I don't even know how to explain it, versus telling a story on a page. And for whatever reason, I understood it. I had the good fortune of having a producer walk me around E3 and sort of explain everything to me. This is this, this is this, this is how we're doing this. And then working kind of with the creative directors. But these days, it's so interwoven that I don't know that anybody, I don't think, there may be people that are stronger in, traditional writing, and there may be people that are stronger in game writing, but I think there's a huge overlap of understanding now, just because that's what everyone does. That's what you're all raised on. So.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. I think it's Dan. Bring us home, Dan.
All right. Hi, my name is Dan Begloff. I'm a dramatic writing senior, and I intend to go into narrative design for games. I had a question about choice-based narratives and specifically multiple endings. So some think of them as kind of the end point of narrative design, and it's like a huge marketing point for games like Detroit Become Human, for example. But other game writers like John Ingold from Inkle, for example, they believe that multiple endings are completely redundant and they take away from the effectiveness of the story. So do you believe multiple endings enhance the game narrative or diminish from it?
So, at USC, we sort of talk about two different types of narrative, and one is the sort of the narrative you're given, and one is the emergent narrative, which means the experience, like you were talking about basketball earlier. And you had a great setup story, but also the story is when you're just out playing basketball with your buddies, the actual events in that game are what you're going to go talk about. Oh, remember when I made that 3-pointer? Or what? I don't know basketball very well, but I know you can make 3-pointers. I actually believe there's one good ending to every story, but when you quote things like the Detroit game, and there's 85 different endings, and it's all driven from choices, it makes you, hopefully it feels satisfying. It will feel satisfying to your experience that you had playing that game, that emergent narrative.
Yeah, I mean, I think it enhances if it's based on a choice you made. So if you made an actual impact on the story, it's not necessary that you have 85 endings, but you have 3 or 4 based on big events or big choices.
My perspective is that, at least with the ones I've experienced so far, because it's still an evolving process, you're going to find that people are mostly interested in experiencing multiple endings, which is its own process. And until it becomes sort of the norm, I think the novelty of multiple ending productions will eventually fade, because as they become more common. But at least for the time, I remember years ago, there was a movie called Clue based on the board game that had 3 different endings, and it was a silly gimmick that when people went to the theaters, they got one of the 3 endings, and then inevitably when they released the DVD or the VHS, actually in those days of it, it included all 3 because you wanted to actually get the experience that wasn't as random. But I think now that we actually have the process for, as Marianne and Sandy said, based on your own involvement in the storytelling and your choices, I think that may become more satisfying. But I don't know that we're there yet in terms of the actual connectivity. It's like when I go to a restaurant and I order a seafood dish and it comes in the shell. I still got to make my dinner. I don't want to do that much work. So I think a lot of people will go to a movie or TV show or play a game and wait, I got to come up with the ending? That doesn't seem.
Yeah, I'm with you on the seafood.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, I think it was. I mean, a question about endings is a good place to end. But I really want to thank Patrick and Sandy and Marianne for being here. We'll give you guys another virtual round of applause. Those great insights, and I also want to thank Finn and Kira and Dan for those great questions. And I think we're good to wrap up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.